Welcome to this webinar, launching the work that the AI Forum's Working Group on Large Language Models has been producing this year. I'm Madeline Newman, the Executive Director of the AI Forum for New Zealand. This work's providing the New Zealand context for this really important field. First up, I'd like to welcome Louise Taylor. She's our Deputy Chair to lead us in our opening karakia. Over to you, Louise.
Kia ora koutou. In the AI Forum, we try and incorporate tikanga where we can, including by opening and closing our meetings with a karakia. This karakia is not religious karakia as such, and the aim is to bring us all together and to clear our minds so that we can focus on the presentation we're about to listen to. Tukua te wairua kia rere ki ngā taumata, hei ārahi i a tātou mahi, me tā tātou whai i ngā tikanga ā rātou mā. Kia mau, kia ita, kia kore ai e ngaro, kia pupuri, kia whakamaua, kia tina hui e tā ki e. Kia ora, Madeline.
Kia ora, Louise. Thank you so much. So on today's webinar, we're welcoming Matt Enzor. He's the CEO of Frankly AI and also the chair of our Large Language Models Working Group. Ming Chuck, he's the CTO at Element X and also one of the AI Forum's Executive Council members. Maggie Kusa from Frankly AI and also Professor Ian Watson. It's going to be a really interesting discussion. First up, we're going to talk a little bit about the AI Forum, the white paper itself and the working group that have produced it. This is not a traditional white paper and we'll be introducing the tool we're going to use to, we'll be prototyping to improve access to the content. Remembering that this is the beginning of the journey, not the end, and as the subject continues to evolve, so will the content of our paper, hence the way it's being presented. The AI Forum for New Zealand brings together Aotearoa's artificial intelligence community. We're passionate about advancing the AI ecosystem through connections, advocacy, growing talent and collaboration. We promote the economic opportunities raised by AI, supporting great applications and emerging firms. We work to ensure that society can adapt to the rapid and far-reaching changes that AI technology will bring. Our purpose is to harness the power of AI to enable a prosperous, inclusive and equitable future Aotearoa. We're a member-driven organisation, a not-for-profit, and we currently have around 160 members. That's larger than we've ever been before, not surprising given the amount of interest in AI currently. Our members are made up of approximately 10% government, 10% academia, and the balance or 80% is business. And between them, our members employ more than 110,000 New Zealanders. We're also geographically quite diverse, so 40% of our membership is based in Auckland, but 60% are spread out right across the rest of Aotearoa. We use events, working groups like this one, storytelling and content production, again like this webinar, to broaden our reach across new industries and regions and to provide value to our members. The Large Language Model Working Group was formed at the beginning of this year in response to the unprecedented rise in the use of large language models. We currently have 2 working group members, including 3 professors of AI, not worth citing, but more on them in a moment. Matt's going to walk you through the group shortly. The objectives then of the white paper is to provide a comprehensive overview of the benefits, challenges and governance considerations associated with large language models in New Zealand, as well as bringing best practices for deploying and managing these models in the local context. This will help organisations, or it's intended to help organisations and individuals make informed decisions about how to use large language models responsibly and ethically. The audience for the white paper, this white paper, is being delivered to the New Zealand AI Forum and other relevant industry groups, as well as to academic institutions and government agencies. It's also going to be made available to the broader public interested in understanding the impact of large language models. Now I'm going to hand over to Matt Enzor, chair of our Large Language Models Working Group, to introduce the work.
Tēnā koe, Madeline, kia ora koutou. It's been a big week for AI this week, much the same as it was last week. and the week before that. In fact, it's been a massive year for large language models. When I was doing some research for the presentation today, I went to YouTube and I played Gartner's top 5 tech trends for 2023, which they released in November 2022. And you might be surprised that it didn't include generative AI. So they didn't see it coming. And so it has been a year of surprises, really, as we've seen the technology develop. Some people ask, what is a large language model? And it's hard to explain in a sentence, but really it's a model that uses large amounts of data that it reads, and then it has deep learning algorithms to create effectively lots of parameters that link words or phrases or themes together. They weren't supposed to be smart. So the first large language models, we were using GPT-3 last year, and it was pretty clumsy. It wasn't that great. It was better than anything else at the time. But what happened is they found that as they started adding more and more parameters, so it's a bit like neural pathways in your brain, LLMs started to get what they call emergent capabilities. So these are things like the ability to understand humor, the ability to understand context, how we think, even going as far, some would say, understand how the world works. And so it's been a real year of discovery. Perhaps and we've just passed the anniversary now of ChatGPT coming out. And it wasn't until GPT-4 came out in March that we really saw the power of large language models. But I think OpenAI has really absorbed a lot of the media coverage this year. There's been so much happening outside of ChatGPT and those things, but it's been really hard to get that coverage. Perhaps the biggest announcement for me of the year was in September. I can't remember the actual date, but it was when OpenAI announced that they were going to integrate vision, so the ability for the large language model to process pictures. They were integrating what was at that stage called I've forgotten the word for it now, code generator, the ability for it to write Python scripts and then execute it, and the ability for it to effectively move all these things and bring them together into one large language model. Now, if you've been watching science fiction movies, the idea of AI being able to communicate, being able to understand what it can see, being able to write code and implement code, this is just something quite unexpected for 2023. But it has thrown up some useful, some intriguing use cases. I used it for the Rugby World Cup. I don't know if you remember Sam Cane. Yeah, painful. So I snipped that video, put it into GPT-4 V as it was then, and I said, "Hey, is this really a red card?" And sadly for all the All Black supporters, I said, "Absolutely, that's definitely a red card, no doubt." I put the Springbok captains, just snipped that video, put it in, and I said, "Pretend you're the TMO, make a ruling." I said, "Ooh, this is a tough one. I'll be happy with the yellow card." I thought, "Wow, man, this model that's trained on X-rays of lungs and all these different things around the world is just as good as rugby refereeing as a TMO." I've done some other things. I put an Auckland Transport plan. They consult on plans. They sent me a plan of a road they were going to do, and I pushed it into GPT-4. And I said, "Oh, can you review this for me? Can you do a safety audit? Can you do a risk? And then can you write me a letter back to Auckland Transport with all these points?" And it did it, and even marked up the plan for me. So this is the kind of capability that's just sort of dropping into our lap. And one of the challenges for this working group is being able to write a white paper that keeps up with all of these things. And we're going to talk a bit today about what we call retrieval augmented generation. So this is technology. Ming may well correct me here, but it feels like it's been around for about 6 weeks in a decent form. And it was certainly part of the last OpenAI release. And what this does is it means that you can ask the large language model just to work on the information that you provide it. So not to use everything it knows, but actually real facts that you give it. Probably the latest thing that's come out this week is Mistral. So Mistral 7B comes from a French firm, and it's an open source large language model. And importantly, it has no guardrails. you can alter anything you like. And so it was described to me as the genie is finally out of the bottle. So anyone can have a large language model and do whatever they like with it. So this is just hot off the press. So I think with things like this, it's even more important now that we have a group like the AI Forum putting this information out into the public. Not so much information, but what does it mean for New Zealand? What does it mean for all the different aspects of our economy? Just to start, before we move on to the next phase, this is interesting. This is Exhibit 4 from BCG, and if you can follow on the screen here, what they did is they did a task with a group of people, and then they gave that group of people GPT-4 and said, "Okay, can you do another similar task?" And they measured their performance. What's key here is you can see people who have above average proficiency on this task, a darker green than those who are lighter green. And so what happened, as you can see here, the most obvious thing to me is that the average performance of the group moved dramatically. Well, hard to know the scale, but moved clearly to up here. So a couple of things jump out of this. If you're actually average and you do nothing about using GPT-4, your performance will drop to way below average. We've noticed that actually the benefits for organisations are typically for those staff whose proficiency is below average. So you can grow the capability, grow the performance, improve the performance of that group, but not as much as you can for people who are already proficient. So this, I think, is a sign of what will happen to organisations who don't use AI, who just ignore it. Their performance will stay here and be way below average. And those organisations that do. It's an interesting fact that the people here with above average proficiency are the ones who at the moment are not taking up AI. They can't see the point. The point is, if you don't, you can probably see what will happen. Now, whether this applies to your business, your market, well, that's the point of the white paper, isn't it? The other thing is I've been a consultant for 30 years. I have not been able to break this. We can do it fast and cheap, but we can't do it with quality, or we can do it fast and quality, but we can't do it cheap. Actually, my hypothesis is in 2024, this will happen. So by introducing AI, you'll be able to do things quickly, cheaply, and with high levels of quality. One of the things we've discovered this year is we thought that humans would always be in the loop, and indeed they will, but we thought it was important that they were reviewers of what the AI was doing. What we found is AI is actually a really good reviewer, much better than a human for many tasks. Doesn't mean that the human doesn't need to review what AI has reviewed, but it's easy to put all of your lessons learned, all of the mistakes that everyone in the organization has ever made, put it into the AI and say, hey, can you review this work for us? And it will apply those and give you areas to look at. So this, I think, is one of the most exciting things for 2024. What parts of New Zealand's economy, what parts of market segments, what types of organisations will suddenly be able to get into that area there and apply that internationally. If other countries are able to get into this area here, what does that mean for New Zealand? So I'll quickly go through the members of the working group. Madeline, sorry, you should have been up here, but this is just a cut and paste from the website. So we have a wide range of people on the working group. In fact, 3 screens of people. And just to give you a bit of an idea of formed in February, and we've been adding members as we've gone along, who have shown interest and expertise. What we did to start with the white paper is try and literally write it. So we sat down, we came up with chapters, we have apportioned chapters. Ming was very helpful in sort of putting a structure down. And then we had quite a few meetings, and made absolutely no progress. And I was thinking, well, I'm the chair, and I don't really want to sit down and write paragraphs and pages on LLMs in New Zealand, because I know it's just going to go out of fashion. Not out of fashion. It's going to go out of, what do you call it? Things are going to change, and so I'm going to end up perhaps wasting my time. So what we did is we came up with the structure, and what I want you to do here is the chat is open. So as I go through the chapters that we will have in the white paper, just into the chat things, either comments on that particular chapter, things you think we've missed, or names of people who are experts in that area. So obviously the foundation chapter will be Te Māori. Now, we don't have a chapter lead for this yet. Government policy, I've put myself down there just as an interim, because I think, honestly, government, shorter money, shorter time, need to get things done. There could be big impacts of LLMs there. Social impact and inclusion, we don't have a chapter leader for that yet. Healthcare, sadly, Dr. George Gray was our chapter leader there. He was part of Maori Health Authority, which has been disestablished. So he had to give up that role. Education sits with Masa. Disaster response and management. So New Zealand's a bit floody, a bit slippy. How do we use AI to get much better at that? You can see we're making a few adjustments on the go here. This used to be human resources. Tom Walker is on our working group. So Tom's an expert in talent and recruitment. And what we asked Tom some interesting questions. What skills do people need in the future, and things like that. So we've split that into two. 7 and 8 really. We've got a few things to say here, but this may well change the way we split it up. I think a lot of these things apply across most of the world. And so the uniqueness isn't necessarily New Zealand. So we sort of have to work through exactly what the chapter headings will be here. Agriculture, obviously, massive for New Zealand, massive. And so Siobhan has kindly agreed to take the lead for that. We yet to have someone for retail, yet to have someone for hospitality and tourism, communications, media, and social media. Transportation is my heritage, so I'm the chapter lead for that. Siobhan's put her name forward for financial services. We have no one for legal services. Habib from Spark is taking telecoms. Maggie taking sustainability. At the moment, we don't have anyone for construction and infrastructure. Madeline is looking after wellbeing, looking after arts and culture, and again, we have no one for defence and research and development. So the idea is these are the areas that we're looking at, and I'll show you now about how we're going to do that. So I mentioned we really don't want to sit down and rewrite the white paper every month as new technology comes out. So what we've come up with is obviously using AI to produce what we think will be a living document, but also something quite transformational. So we're collecting information. Panels take the transcripts of those and we feed them into the AI. We send interview questions to people. I've interviewed them face to face, or we send out Frankly, which is an AI interviewing tool, which interviews people and collects the transcripts. And there are also some quite rigorous academic papers. And so what happens is that for each of those chapters I mentioned, we put that information into what we call a corpus. You could argue it's also a Google Drive directory. Then what this does is go into what we call the RAG technology, such as retrieval augmented generation. So we say to the AI, hey, you can use all of the stuff in the chapter corpuses. The reason we put different information into different chapter directories is just so we can tag it and say, actually, this is more relevant to agriculture, to give the AI a bit of a head start. Now, we're very, very thankful to IBM for the work they've done in producing us a prototype, just to make sure that this would work. And it's blown my mind, really, with the kind of things that it can do. But it is just a proof of concept at this stage. So what happens is IBM Discovery takes the information in there, it works its way through IBM Watson X, and then it comes out in the interface as a form of a white paper tool, which I'll show you in a minute. The benefits of this is there are two things that pop out. It will generate a white paper for us, going all the way back here just to the information that we're happy for it to use. But also, this is an innovation, is that there will be a public access bot. And I'll demonstrate that in a minute, which means that any member of the public can say, hey, what will there be the impact on cinemas in Tauranga? Now, we might not have enough information specifically for that, but it will do its best based on the information that it has. to give you an idea of what that is. So we think that will be a very valuable way for individuals to find out experts' view on things that will make a difference to them in New Zealand. What I'm going to do now is just hand over to Ming, and he's going to take us through a live demonstration of retrieval augmented generation, which I think is probably one of the most important technologies invented this year.
Kia ora, Matt. Yeah, thank you. And yeah, I mean, I guess I just wanted to talk a little bit about RAG just in general first, and showcase a little bit of an example. Also, in general, before Matt shows us what we've been doing specifically in the working group. So RAG, retrieval augmented generation, you're gonna hear this word a lot now. Why is it relevant? So everybody, since the early days of LLMs, have been talking about, now, what's out there is cool. How do I actually bring my own data into the mix? So there's two main ways you can bring your own data. Either you fine tune a model, and essentially you're baking your data, you're baking your data into the model, or you use something like retrieval augmented generation, where basically during runtime, you're bringing in your organization data live and using that to help form the answer. So that's just a little diagram just to kind of show, you have a question from a user, then that goes into either documents stored in a vector database, which is really just to help it retrieve, or it's searching a bit wider in the web, potentially for your CRM, etc. Brings that into the context of the language model, so then it can answer your the user question better, pegs it more towards the actual content, and brings in content that model hasn't been trained on. So, which is why this is becoming so popular. In fact, most of the use cases we hear these days are around the RAG pattern. A lot of enterprises are going, we've got so much data, especially just with the internal enterprise search problem. How do I make use of all of that data in my enterprise? How do I surface the information? How do I make our staff more efficient in using that information? So let's take a look, a little bit of a demo. I like demos, I like the live demos. And look at a tool. So there are plenty of tools, and a lot of vendors are moving towards low code, no code, which is great, because it allows not teams without wide access to developers to put together their own RAG system, I suppose. You've got your Azure ML Studio, your Google Maker Suite, What's-the-Next Studio. But what I'll showcase today is probably the most well-known GPT, specifically GPTs and GPT Assistant, just because of the kind of consumer-friendly nature of it, and how easy they've made it to use. So just one moment as I share my screen. Here we go. All right, so you might have heard, I think it's been a month now, that OpenAI created this GPTs. I don't even know how to pronounce this because I have to stress the S just to not get confused with GPT, where it's like a marketplace and very consumer oriented in creating a customized GPT. And what does a customized GPT mean? Here's the interface. You basically give it name, description. That doesn't actually do anything with the model, I don't think. But the instructions, this is where you can bring in some of that prompt engineering to customize how it should respond. Some conversation starters. But what's really neat is this bit here, where you can bring in your own knowledge. So that's as Matt said, the RAG pattern, the retrieval augmented generation. We can upload some files, and you can give it some of those other capabilities that Matt talked about. Code interpreter, write Python code and executor, generate images, or browse the web. So there's this, and this is meant to be, very, very consumer facing, and very kind of easy to use. They've even built a GPT to help you build your GPT. I won't spend too much on this one, because if you need to go one more, I guess, level of control, and I've tried this one with the exact same prompt as assistants. It works okay. It doesn't always search your database, but it does most of the time. Then you've got assistants, which is kind of still low code, no code, but not the less of the public facing one. This is on OpenAI Playground, which is kind of the console for their API. And very similar things. So I'll just go into one that I've pre-created just so I don't have to wait for it to generate. Again, you've got your instructions, you select your model. You can see that we can do that here, but not in the in GPTs. Again, what do you want to add, and your data. And just as a bit of a working example, what I did was, so plug for another working group in the AI forum, the AI governance working group. So I had an export of the entire website in Markdown. I've uploaded the export, and then basically created an assistant, and then I asked the questions. Who are some AI experts I can get in touch with? And basically, it's now pulled that information. It wouldn't have known that if I didn't give it the data, but it's pulled this information from that content. This was a snapshot a little while before it was released. The website was released, so this might have actually changed in the website, but I did check it against the export, which I had here. So yeah, and then I also asked what toolkits are available, and then it goes to talk about the light toolkit, the robust toolkit, comprehensive toolkit. And if we just check against the website, this is the data that it's pulled it from, and summarized it quite well. So you can see the power of supplying your own data. And then another question I just asked from a small organization, what toolkit would you recommend? And then it's gone and recommended one. This is one I just tried just before the call. None of these I've continually pressed run until I got the good answer. These were the first time I've pressed run, so you just have to trust me on that one. I just didn't want to wait for it to. It does take a little while. That's probably a right downside because there's a lot of things happening in the background right now: the retrieval, the checking, reference checking, which you can see here. It's given me a reference. Which is another benefit of this whole RAG pattern. You can refer to the source material that it got the answer from. This is really cool. And I did the same thing with not a working group in the AI forum, the explainable working group, which some of you on the call might have actually gone to the launch for that as well. And that is a PDF white paper. Again, I've just uploaded the PDF, and I've summarized some case studies for explainable AI in New Zealand, and it talks about triage tool, landslides, legal sentencing. I needed to double check that to see that wasn't making things up, and indeed it's pulled out some of the content from that paper. So yeah, here's really the power of combining your data with LLMs that everyone's talking about. Here's an interface for it. Again, this is not the only one. This is a version, quite an accessible one, but there are limitations with this one, obviously. Limited to 20 documents to upload for now. You don't have as much control on the retrieval process, and also, how you can only control it to some extent. So then, that's, if you need even more power, that's when you start putting together, this together yourself. On other platforms, and one of them is IBM Watson X, which Matt is going to demonstrate, and demonstrate it on the corpus for the white paper.
Thanks, mate. I think my screen sharing should be back up again. I think Ming said off screen before the thing, 90% of the use cases for LLMs are probably relevant to RAG. So you really want to know what the LLM is using. Well, that technology is here now. So I'm going to launch the white paper tool. So what this is a large RAG. This is what the white paper will look like. So there will be parts that are fixed text. So in terms of introductions, table of contents, definitions, and so on. And then each chapter will be generated. It's important, and these are sort of the accountabilities I put up here. So it's the role of the working group to make the conclusions and recommendations and bring relevant case studies. So the white paper won't just be entirely a generated document. But we're also saying to the generation tool, you can't use anything unless you can reference the source of it. So if we go now, this is just a screen recording I made of the white paper tool. So you can see here, I just asked it, what impact will AI have on New Zealand? Now, I have to say, we filled it up with a bit of dummy data. I convinced GPT-4 that it was an expert in agriculture in New Zealand, and we got, frankly, to interview GPT-4. So we've got lots of information on agriculture, same with tourism, and a fair bit on recruitment. And so what it does, unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, but it just thinks that the important things are the things I've talked about. So you can see here, agriculture, potential benefits, data privacy and security, it's brought up. So to provide clear information how AI is used, customer trust and privacy. So what it's done is it's gone through all of the information. It has, this is a very general question, I'll ask a specific question in a minute. Metrics that can be used. You can see it's talking particularly about agriculture section. Again, that's the bias because I've just put on lots of information about agriculture. And then it's provided all of the documents that it's referenced to bring that together. What I'll do is one more specific: the impact of AI on HR in New Zealand. I'll just move it along so it scrolls up again. So this is my view more interesting because it's a specific topic. So you can probably read that as well as I can. You can see it's referenced. So it's referenced Tom Walker. We're at the moment we're talking about whether we reference individuals that are interviewed or not. We've got a bit of work to do around giving interviewees an understanding of how what they say may well be used. But given Tom's on the working group, we thought that was all right. So you can see it's bringing up things here. So this effect, it's just like 2% probably of the capability that we'll have in a month or two. But the idea being that this can form a generated part of the white paper. Summarise job interviews, candidates, leading to better hires. However, it also concerns about displacement, job losses and inequality, and AI decision making, some biased data. It's basically saying here it needs to know the laws and regulations of the country that it's operating in. Overall, the impact is significant. It's important for HR professionals to be aware of potential benefits. Fully realise the benefits crucial too, and then it's used the academic papers there. You can see there's one on bias, and there was another one there. So that's just a very quick sample of what the tool will do. We haven't wasted any of members' funds on the publishing and branding. But this will be available. I can make it available right now to members of the AI forum, but it is sort of that first 1 or 2%. We've literally only spent a week putting this together, and we just wanted to prove that it would work. So, just before we move into the final panel discussion, these are ways to get involved. I haven't been able to keep track of the chat, but the numbers keep going up. So congratulations. Thank you for all your volunteering and ideas and those sorts of things. Look, if you're not a member, your organisation is not a member, we're still really interested in data sources. If you're an expert, agree to be interviewed. We'll send a Frankly link and off you go. We're a volunteer group. So one of the things that we have is when we get documents, we do have to process and format them. So the RAG operates the best it can. So if you're keen to help us out with that, probably if you're not a member, for goodness sake, get your organisation to join the AI Forum. Nothing more important in 2024. Look, if you are a member of the AI Forum, the chapter lead role. So what the chapter lead role is to really be the gatekeeper for the information that goes into the corpus. So you have to have some idea about AI, some idea about the market segment. We really want someone who decides whether or not something should be in that corpus. And if you are an organisation, tell everyone about the white paper talk. So thanks for that. We'll move now to the expert panel, which I'll happily moderate. So way to get questions into here is through the Q&A. There are some existing questions in there which I can we take before we go to the panel, and there's a few around Te Ao Māori, data sovereignty, cultural diversity, and things like that. So difficult for me to answer until we get that chapter lead for Te Ao Māori. That second chapter, chapter 2, around social inclusion, is really, that's where we capture the very diverse communities within New Zealand, and what impact it might have in different ways. So let me just bring up the questions. I suppose the question I'd like to put first to the panel, and it's really, so one thing I've noticed is that there's an enormous number of tools now available in New Zealand, for free or otherwise, but the majority of people are just sitting back and not using them. So what do we think the barriers are to adoption in New Zealand? I might start with you, Ian, if that's all right.
That's an interesting question. I think we're going to see a big change next year. This year, we, and by we, I mean literally we, everybody, have just been getting used to the idea of large language models, computers that will give us kind of fairly complex answers to fairly complex questions or prompts. But we're all using them in much the same way at the moment. You give the GPT a prompt, it comes back with an answer, and then you have a bit of a toing and froing between you and GPT or Bard or whichever one you're using, and eventually you either give up or you end up with something which you think is useful, and then you go off and do something with it. You put it into a report or into a slide deck or something. What we're going to see next year is increasingly we're going to see the large language models being linked up with agents. So they will have some agency. They will be able to do something for you with it. And you will still have oversight, and you'll still, have to give it the green light to go ahead and do something. But increasingly, we're going to see these large language models being able to actually do things for you. Now, that's going to be perhaps kind of more obvious on a personal level, but that's also going to happen at a commercial level, where interactions between businesses will start to take place with large language models as the intermediaries between them. And that's going to be really kind of another whole game-changing situation. And we're going to look back at large language models as really just being a kind of an interface.
I know, Maggie, you're involved in the marketplace, dealing with organisations that know nothing about LLMs that want to get into it. Do you have thoughts on why they're not?
Yeah, I think it's mostly they don't know how to get involved. If it's looking at staff, they're not sure whether that's what right tools to use. Can they use these tools? Are they secure enough? And then organizations on their own are still trying to weave through I think, internal politics in a way of a lot of them that we spoke to are setting their own AI workshops, own AI strategies. And as they try to kind of weave through those legal parts of it, technical parts, the staff, it's kind of this connection between the legal team and the tech team, and the everyday staff not understanding what's happening there. So they're getting mixed messages, and I think a lot of them are either not fully going in and holding off while they hear what's best for them next. Be my thought.
I know, Madeline, I'm quite jealous of the forums you get to sit in. You hear all over New Zealand what people are talking about. You get that sense that New Zealand's lagging, that we just can't quite get it together to use these tools.
There's a bit of that, but I think it's so. When you talk about some of the forums I participate in, I was in Singapore last week for for MET's APEC Innovation Symposium, and that included people from sort of South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and they have the similar kinds of problems to us, or they see themselves as having the similar kinds of problems to us. It was really, the similarities were quite astounding. There's a lack of trust out there, so AI has a bit of a sketchy reputation. And that's one of the reasons why this sort of work is really important, to build understanding and trust. So you can see how these tool sets can be used positively in your industry, whatever that might be, and help to dispel some of the misunderstandings that are out there. That's really, that trust thing is really important.
I think from my perspective, a local government particularly, they're just out of money. They need to get so much more done than they have in the past. Do you think, in the next year we'll see local government take on this kind of technology, Madeline? Is that on the cards, or are we going to have to wait a bit longer?
So there's quite a lot of positive noises coming out of central government currently, which is always positive. And one of the things about this, which is that makes it really quite. There were a few comments there on sustainability and things like that. These tool sets are brilliant for helping us to allocate our really limited resources. Run what if scenarios, bring in suggested alternate paths, and really supercharge the capabilities within local government and central government. I think we'd be really remiss if we don't, if those areas don't start to use them. Local government, I was at the ALGM conference last month. Really good one. The AI governance, for example, that ALGM has written, is being, in little old New Zealand, has been adopted around the world currently as best practice, which is not a lot of people know about, but there's certainly the interest is there. So I really hope we do see a bit more.
We'll grab that and put that in the corpus for sure. So, Ming and Ian, it's just a question I have around, I sort of raised it before, OpenAI have it's either a technological lead or a technological and branding lead. Everyone knows about GPT, ChatGPT, and those sorts of things. But do you think there's a risk that LLMs will become a one-horse race? Gemini's tried. We're still not quite sure whether it's caught up. But Ming, to you first, what's your thoughts around how LLMs will develop outside of OpenAI?
Yeah, well, definitely, OpenAI did have a bit of a lead, and from their kind of, I guess, quite clever decision of getting it to a point that was good enough to open it up to the world, and it went viral and had so much testing, I guess, so much user testing within a very short amount of time. I forgot what the stats were, but they were mind-blowing. So, and I guess, obviously it improved the model itself, the architecture itself, but I think what they ended up with a lead was all that user testing is not just the LLM, but it's sort of engineering around the LLM, the guardrails, the maybe some hard-coded rules to block people trying to jailbreak, as people realized. So they definitely, had a lot more battle testing. And then in terms of capability as well, and they did for a while, GPT-4 lead in a lot of benchmarks, and there was quite a wide gap with certain benchmarks. They have interesting names like HelloSwag, but certain benchmarks, they would lead quite a bit. Now the gap is closing. We're starting to see, open source models like, Llama 2, for example, and closing a gap, not quite there. Other proprietary models have been closing the gap for a while. I mean, Gemini being the most recent, and Gemini Ultra. It's not available yet to test, but people will certainly be testing it once it does become available, as that is meant to beat GPT-4 in a few benchmarks. But yeah, really your point is that gap is closing. But whether or not they're going to still create a lead, maybe not just in LLM architecture, but the ease of access, potentially the cost, we'll have to kind of wait and see. But yeah, capability-wise, there's a lot more options than were last year. People are going towards smaller models, so you might not necessarily need top-performing models, highest benchmarks for a specific application. Hence why Mistral 7 billion parameters is relatively low. So yeah.
Yes, interesting. I mean, obviously, OpenAI stole a march on everyone, but the competitors are catching up. In some ways, that's just going to continue the dominance of the big tech companies, because Microsoft is essentially bankrolling OpenAI. And if you want to use ChatGPT in an enterprise setting, then you've got to use their Azure cloud services. Google, of course, with Bard and now Gemini, you've got to be locked into the Google infrastructure. Facebook, I mean, Meta, of course, is another tech giant. Apple is kind of the quiet dark horse. And that's where we're going to see, I think, some of these smaller models, because Apple's hardware, their phones and tablets and computers, all, at least the modern ones, all have their custom silicon in, which include neural chips, which are specifically ideal for running large language model software. So we're going to see a lot of, perhaps announced the year coming, AI happening much, much better than Siri currently happens on your phone. And again, that's where agents, I think, are likely to come in, where you can ask Siri to go and book you some tickets to the movies, rather than having to do it yourself. Things like that. So there isn't going to be one front runner, but we are going to still be stuck in this sort of state, and very closely tied in with the cloud computing services. So again, where the big cloud computing providers, who happen to be these same companies, of course, Amazon would be another one, and they are also working on LLMs, tying that in with their Alexa device.
I've got one last question, which I'll put to all of you. So we'll go start with you, Maggie, and it's sort of a mixture of the questions that are coming in the Q&A. And it's around kind of, the role of regulation or government to protect citizens and protect business, protect economy. So the AI Act has just been agreed, if not yet implemented. But some have said, that's going to be the biggest break on AI development there's ever been. And when you look at the size of the fines for breaching the Act, I can absolutely see why that would be the case. But others are saying, look, we're scared of AI because there are no regulations in New Zealand which protect us, which is not entirely true. You have the Privacy Act and things like that. So just the final topic is really, is AI a threat to employment? Is it a threat to our businesses? And is there a role, I guess, of regulation in there? It's a big question, so answer it as you wish.
Yeah.
Maggie.
I don't see AI as a threat. I think it's the way we deploy it and the way we use it and the way we look at it that really comes into effect. For me, if we're looking, AI is it's not there yet. And I think we're quite away from it being AGI. But what we use it in, the way we're using it as well, we're limited by how quickly we as humans can move and change the way our systems move. I don't think if we have anything right now that we can be able to turn around everything and adjust to anything with that speed. But having some regulations is also kind of a good step forward, because we don't want to be caught where we don't have any regulations if AI, because of the speed of AI, is moving. And normally regulations is a lot slower. So at least we're starting to have those conversations now, and things are starting to happen. And we wouldn't want it to be, we're too far down the track for any regulations to come down. Those are my thoughts.
Madeline.
Sorry, I was just on mute there. So the EU tends to, we all know, the EU tends to be quite prescriptive, which can be really restrictive on innovation. I think that's what you were referring to, Matt. So in New Zealand, I think we'll probably want to develop our own regulations that reflect our own society and the ways that we're actually using these tool sets, which is, again, makes this kind of work that we're doing, this working group, really important. I think that the concept currently is that what we really need is a cohesive set of principle-based regulations, which allow you to innovate and allow you to test your innovations and create sandboxes, so to speak, where you can test your innovations against those regulations in a nice, safe space, so that you build up confidence that the tool sets that you're using are right for the area. I think the point about taking jobs, we're at or close to full employment in New Zealand. And some of the data that we see from other areas where AI adoption is already happening, and I'm thinking about advanced manufacturing as a really good example. And in the advanced manufacturing draft ITP, find all these figures. But basically, what it says is, both domestically and internationally, 80% of organisations that adopt AI as part of their processing actually either stayed the same in the number of staff members, or increase the number of staff members they had. And then on top of that, the staff members that they had, because they retrained those people into new roles, their working conditions improved, so accidents went down, as an example, but also their career mobility increased. And we're seeing that in other organisations. Spark's a really good example of that, where they're creating these accelerators within their organisation that allow people from different parts of their organisation to come in and try their hand at this stuff. And for some, that's a worst case scenario, they end up with better products because now they've got people from customer service actually in the development teams. Or best case scenario, you end up with those people actually transferring into more of a technology-based a domain for working life. So you're creating that career mobility, and off the back of that, social mobility, which is kind of positive.
Man.
Yeah, I mean, a lot's been said already. My personal, view would be that in the short term, at least, I think, it's going to just be an acceleration of what people are doing already. But I think over time, people will realize that some of the things that now can be solved with LLMs, it's going to make up a smaller portion of the day, which is hopefully a good thing, and they can actually do the job they were actually paid to do, which is also a good thing. Because so many times, I hear graduates going into workforce of all this knowledge they got from university, only to be spending 6 hours a day on spreadsheets or writing documentation, and it's a big demotivator. So I think that expectation also from people going into the job market as graduates will probably also shift in terms of what is meaningful work. And I guess regulations. I think, or at least in the EU Act, there are certain applications that are classed as high risk or prohibited. So there will be some things where I might be able to help with in terms of general productivity, but in terms of decision making in some areas, it will not be possible. The EU or anyone serving customers in the EU. So that's my thoughts.
Okay. And Ian, last words. Just have a minute to go.
Yes, I don't see it's causing mass unemployment. There are specific sectors which might have to change what they do, and maybe we'll see fewer people. I mean, graphic design is maybe a fairly obvious one. If you make your living designing logos for companies, well, it's pretty easy to do that with DALL-E now and generate pretty good logos pretty quickly. But that's a very sort of specific industry. But I think across the board, I agree with what the other panelists have said. I've had a look at the EU regulations, or at least their new AI law. And it's quite interesting what they class as high risk. It's fairly obvious things like medical devices. Well, we would all agree that if it's a sort of a life and death medical device that you're on, then the AI is pretty important, and so there should be some regulation on it. But they include things like HR as high risk. And what they're really saying is that anything that can have a profound effect on someone's life, and let's face it, getting a job or being fired has usually quite a big effect on your life, then that's a high risk and needs regulation. And so I think that's quite a good thing that they've done there. because currently people like myself in the university, building AIs, we're free to create what we like and put them out on the web and turn them into products and do all sorts of things. Whereas people in the biology department or the chemistry department and so on, they cannot make products or things and release them on the public without having to go through all sorts of checks. I think someone recently said that in order to open a sandwich shop, you have to fill out more forms and than you do to release something like ChatGPT. So yeah, it's definitely time for some regulation.
Thank you. Thank you to the panel. Those of you online, this has sort of been a little bit of an insight into what being on the working group is like. We have these sorts of conversations, and things are always changing, and there are always new questions. And I think that kind of sums up the living white paper that we are creating. That's our goal, is to be able to answer questions as they come up, and then based on expert data and opinion. So I'll just bring up a final slide before we move to the final karakia. So this is, you can see some contacts there. It's my address. There's a QR code there, which you can use to give feedback or volunteer your time for AI Forum, this working group. That'll take you to Frankly, who will ask you some interesting questions. If you are desperately keen to have a go on the white paper tool, just drop me an email. We're not making that public for a month or two, just because it needs a bit of work to make sure it works perfectly. And any suggestions you have, you can also just send straight through to me. So I'll hand over to Louise. Thank you so much for joining this launch. It is a really exciting time, and I'm keen for as many people to be involved as possible. So I'll hand over. Thank you. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Matt. Thanks so much to all our presenters, and also thanks to everybody who's been listening and contributing in the chat. I've certainly learned a lot from the presenters, but also from some of the comments. So yeah, thanks very much. So since we opened with a karakia, we'll also be closing with a karakia. This essentially frees us to go about our daily lives with the knowledge that we've learned from the session today. Unuhia, unuhia, unuhia ki te urutapunui. Kia wātea, kia mama, te ngākau, te tinana, te wairua I te ara takata. Koiara e rongo whakaire ake ki runga, kia tina haume hui e tae ki e. Kia ora, thanks.